All right. Hello and welcome to this training. If you're seeing this then, it's most likely December 1st. And there's about 30 days until the end of the month, which means there's exactly 30 days in which you can use to basically put yourself on a trajectory to completely change your life in 2026. So with that said, as you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is how to become unrecognizable in 30 days. And as you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is the behavioral reset goals, the 30-day overhaul, environmental lockdown and input starvation, the review, and then your action items for the day or the next few days. So with that said, let's get started and talk about the behavioral reset. So there is a single principle that people misunderstand their entire lives. You don't always change your life by thinking differently first. Sometimes you can change your life by behaving differently long enough for your brain to basically update its internal assumptions about who you are now. Thoughts follow evidence. Identity follows action. Confidence follows proof. The person you believe yourself to be today is nothing more than a pattern of repeated behaviors that your brain got used to. So when the behavior shifts, the identity starts dissolving and a new one starts to take its place. Now the nervous system changes when it gets repeated signals that the old version of you is no longer in charge. When your actions stop matching your previous patterns, the brain stops reinforcing them because they no longer serve a function. So physical actions send data to the brain, not just the other way around. Which is why acting differently can actually force an internal recalibration over time. All these physical cues build a new emotional baseline, which then builds a new mental narrative or a new self-image or a new self-concept, whatever you want to call it, which eventually becomes how you see yourself. And this is why 30 days is such a powerful window. It's long enough to basically disrupt your old identity and your old identity loops, but short enough that your mind doesn't panic and self-sabotage. So the old identity, its oxygen supply, because you stop feeding it with familiar behaviors. And what replaces that oxygen is simple repetition, which slowly anchors a new identity into the nervous system. So once you understand this, the next step is really to understand how to cut out the behaviors that basically keep your old self alive, so that there's room for a new one to form. So before you build anything, you clear the debris, right? Reinvention always has to begin with some form of subtraction. It removes the hidden anchors that quietly pull you backward. You're not adding discipline yet. You're not adding any new habits. You're simply removing what drains you, distracts you, or destabilizes you so that you can build from a clean slate. Essentially, you can't expect momentum if your daily rituals and everything you're doing on a daily basis completely contradicts your goals for the next 30 days. So the first move is removing everything that keeps you tied to the end, the identity that you're trying to outgrow. So you start by eliminating the habits that directly erode your capacity to execute. And these are the obvious culprits, but also they are usually the ones that you defend out of habit. So you need to completely cut out things such as alcohol, junk food, weird sleep patterns, late-night dopamine binges, and repetitive scrolling. These are just the basics, and all of them drain your cognitive bandwidth more than you actually realize. So cutting it just doesn't work unless you swap the void with something neutral. Otherwise, you just slip back into doing those things. So for example, you can replace snacks with water or overstimulation and scrolling on your phone with just a little bit of silence or reading books, for example. So removing the destructive triggers will, in general, reduce the emotional roller coaster. That and brings your nervous system basically back to a calm baseline. And you also need to clear any physical reminders of the old identity. Like any clutter, messy spaces, digital chaos, you can even throw out or give to charity some clothes and items in general. Just get rid of as much as possible. In those 30 days, when your physical world is clean, your brain spends less energy trying to orient itself. So a simple environment will just reduce the friction so that taking positive action becomes easier and more automatic than not. So once the destructive habits are gone, you just need to look at the habits that aren't necessarily harmful, but still slow your momentum down. So first, you should track the behaviors that aren't hurting you directly, but keep you scattered and unfocused. So entertainment that numbs you, for example, or conversations that dilute your ambition. Certain people in your life. And if you want to learn more about this, you can see the previous video I made and any activities that feel productive, but aren't actually really moving you closer to anything meaningful. All of them need strict boundaries. So decide when and how much you consume, and you can set specific windows for consumption rather than allowing it to bleed into your productive hours, and try to make sure that you track how much time you actually spend on these things so that you can see where the real leaks are. And make sure your allocation serves your goals first before allowing space for low-value activities. Now, by reducing, you'll be able to stop accidental self-sabotage through overstimulation. Also, try to reduce the number of micro-decisions you make daily so that the brain doesn't burn out on nonsense. So, for example, you can batch tasks or prepare routines in advance and cut any unnecessary choices. A streamlined day in general will free up mental energy for the habits you're about to build. Now, after removing and reducing, you finally created the space to introduce small shifts that actually support your goals. Now you can fill the gaps with upward pulling behaviors. These don't. Obviously, they don't need to be like intense or something like that. You shouldn't be throwing yourself into the deep end immediately. They simply need to tilt you into the right direction. So replace any reactive mornings with more structured ones. For example, replace nighttime dopamine binges with rituals that are actually calming. These replacements will just give your brain a clear signal of what the new identity actually values. And after a while, the new behaviors will start feeling more natural than the old ones. Now, every low-value action needs to get swapped for something that reinforces discipline, even in small ways. So you can trade endless scrolling for reading, like I said earlier, or trade reality shows for silence or classical music, etc., or for an actual. For example, instead of watching a reality show, you can just go a step backwards and just watch a documentary. So these upgrades just will stack quietly and quickly, because they don't really require a lot of willpower, just awareness of what you're actually doing. Now, behavior is one of the most important aspects as to how identity is built. So your brain believes what you repeatedly demonstrate and do. So when you stop acting like the old you, your mind stops identifying with the old you. It's that simple. So identity becomes a training effect, not necessarily a starting point. Most people try to change who they are first and then behave accordingly, which obviously that can work. We do a lot of that with our private clients. But in these 30 days, you're basically trying to flip the whole thing. You're trying to do all of that work in a shorter amount of time. So in these 30 days, you need to flip that order. You behave differently while still feeling like your old self, and eventually the gap closes. So every action you take sends a signal to your brain about who you're becoming. When your actions contradict your old habits for long enough, the identity built on these habits collapses. And so once the identity begins shifting and changing, decision-making becomes a bit easier because you feel and turn on the aligned. And as your identity adjusts, you'll feel uncomfortable basically doing the things the old way, because they no longer really match who you're becoming or who you are in those 30 days. And you'll notice friction where there used to be comfort, and eventually the new behaviors will just feel natural, and the old behaviors will feel more foreign. Now, once that identity starts shifting, the only thing that really locks it in is repetition and consistency. So the nervous system updates through frequency. You don't need some crazy monk-like discipline. You just need reliable follow-through. And when you perform the same behaviors repeatedly across consistent conditions, your brain basically rewires. So over time, you become someone who acts automatically in alignment with the identity you're actually building. So data repetition will build familiarity, and familiarity will build stability. And the more you repeat a behavior, the less resistance your mind will generate. And what once felt like effort eventually becomes your baseline and starts to feel way more natural. And every day you stick to your behaviors. You vote for your future self, so completing the behaviors builds trust in your own reliability. And that trust will lead to belief. And that belief will lead to internal certainty. Now consistency eventually shifts from something you're doing into something you just are. The behaviors stop requiring motivation, and the habits lock into your identity and basically operate in the background. Like I, for example, don't have to think about sitting here and writing every day because it's just something that happens regardless of whether I feel like it or not. So with a core reset in motion, the next move is giving all of this direction. So you're not just behaving differently, but actually aiming all that energy towards something that's meaningful and structured. So let's talk about OBH goals you need to lock in absolute clarity before you try to change anything. Because your brain cannot follow a direction it cannot see. So you need to sit down and extract the actual truth of where your life stands right now without softening it or decorating it. Vague starting points always produce vague outcomes, so you should treat this like a diagnostic of your life. When you write the truth down without any filters, you basically immediately create leverage, and you create pressure because now you know where you are and you kind of know where you want to go. And that leverage will push you in ways that motivation never could. So this clarity becomes the anchor that guides every decision you make over the next 30 days. And the clearer it is, the faster you will move. So the ABT framework is something that I talked about in a different video, but it's a clarity engine that basically gives you a fixed starting point, a defined target, a compressed timeline, and the exact habits that bridge the gap. So you should treat it like the blueprint that basically removes any confusion, removes any emotional guesswork, and forces you into structure that you can actually follow. And when you use a beat properly, you'll know exactly where you stand, exactly who you're becoming, exactly how fast you need to move, and exactly what you'll be doing every day to make that identity shift for you. So the framework gives your brain certainty, direction, and pressure, which is why it sits at the center of this entire process. So what ABT stands for is actual becoming timeline and habits. Now actual refers to your current reality across your habits, your routines, your patterns, your numbers, and your behaviors. And the full 4 pillars of health, wealth, love, and self. This is your real starting point. Now B stands for becoming. And this is the desired reality you're growing into. Here you basically define the goal and what your habits and actions must align with. T stands for timeline. This is the fixed timeline in which you intend to accomplish the goal, and the timeline creates pressure and urgency, and basically forces faster adaptation by giving your brain a clear deadline and no room for negotiation. So in this case is the 30-day container that we're talking about. And H stands for habits. Habits are the behaviors you install so that the transformation doesn't stay theoretical, but becomes visible and measurable. And these are the daily actions you will need to do to basically transform your actual into your becoming. Now, starting with actual, you need to document your real numbers, your real patterns, and your real tendencies. Your system needs hard data to operate with, so write down your habits and numbers as they currently are. Even if you dislike the truth, this is really important. You should stop lying to yourself about where you are, and then you can, for example, list your weight, your meals, your sleep, your income, your work hours, your content consumption, your social habits. These reveal the real architecture of your life. And then pinpoint what drains you, would distract you, what wastes time, and what keeps you looping in the same place, basically, and keeps you running in circles. These patterns must be disrupted, and then capture your default emotional responses, your default impulses, and your default excuses. The old identity hides inside these details. And then finally, you should tell the truth without sugarcoating it. This process will basically shatter the illusion that you have less to fix than you actually do. Radical honesty here will give you a baseline that removes any denial and forces responsibility. Once you see the truth clearly, you have no other choice but to basically change it. You will see the gap between your desired life and your actual actions, and the realization will hit you in a way that you cannot ignore. And if you accept that this is the starting point, is simply information and you don't shame yourself, then you can use it for fuel. You can use it as fuel for change. So keep the language simple and blunt so your brain cannot twist your reality into something softer. So once the truth is on the table and the real you is no longer hiding an abstraction, you'll feel an immediate need to define who you must become to basically escape the version of yourself that you just exposed. And this is why it's so important to be completely honest here. The next step is becoming sure you all define a version of yourself that you must embody for the next 30 days. And this is about identifying the immediate upgrade that will pull you out of your current patterns with urgency. So you need to create a 30-day version of yourself that is believable, practical, and powerful enough to pull your habits upwards. And this will act as a blueprint and give shape to your actions. Write a clear description of how this 30-day version of you behaves, eats, trains, works things, and responds to pressure. And obviously you can keep that version of you after those 30 days. So try to avoid any vague traits and write concrete behaviors. Describe how they wake up, how they initiate their day, how they end their nights, what they tolerate, and what they refuse to negotiate and identify. Their posture, their tone, their presence, their energy, and their internal language, and try to make very clear how this version of you handles temptation, stress, and inconsistency. These are the exact moments that used to derail you. Then write down specific numbers for every goal you have for these 30 days numbers. Remove any ambiguity and create measurable targets that your brain can actually track. So every goal must have a number attached to it, whether it's weight, body fat, percentage, income, work hours, or daily steps. Whatever it is, numbers give you clear feedback on whether you're actually moving forward or staying stuck. So try to record these numbers daily so you can see progress in real time and adjust when needed. So for example, if your goal is to save money, then first off, how much money do you need to save? And secondly, how much do you spend every day? All these things can be turned into numbers. Guys, now you should raise the standards of your daily actions so that they match the becoming identity rather than your old one. So clarify what becomes non-negotiable for the next 30 days. From training to sleep to work, to focus everything and make sure that the standards push you past comfort, but remain achievable enough so that you can actually repeat them daily without collapsing, and possibly repeat them after you're done with those 30 days. And then keep this identity simple and repeatable so that your brain can actually execute it easily, and so that it doesn't create more friction than it needs. So once the upgraded version is designed, you'll need something that forces your system to move quickly and consistently instead of drifting like it usually does. So you'll build this transformation inside a 30-day container. This is the timeline part of this whole framework, the DT part of the whole framework. And for the sake of this video, we've chosen a timeline of 30 days. So the human mind responds to urgency by increasing attention, tightening focus, and reducing procrastination. So time-bound constraints create intensity, and intensity creates consistency. So use the 30-day window like a psychological clamp that basically forces immediate action and movement, and try to choose a specific end date and treat it like an immovable checkpoint. This creates psychological pressure your brain cannot avoid. So pick the exact completion date and write it everywhere so it becomes part of your daily awareness. And tell yourself that every action from now forward basically answers to this date, and make this day the reference point for every decision so that you don't drift. You need to shrink the window of execution so that your system doesn't have room to negotiate. So decide quickly, act quickly, Adjust quickly and just keep moving. Use this pressure to eliminate any hesitation you might have. Hesitation is the gateway back to the old identity. Now the next step is basically translating everything into actions and habits that repeat automatically. So you must design habits that bridge your actual state to your becoming state within the timeline you've set. Habits are the machinery of transformation that will move you forward whether your mood cooperates or not. So you need habits that are small enough to be executed daily, but strong enough to shift your reality, and simple enough that you don't need to really think about them. So build 3 habits per pillar for the health pillar. You can pick habits like fixed meals, sleep times, workout days and times, hydration minimums, morning movement, daily steps, etc. when your body starts feeling better. The rest of your habits will become way easier to maintain. Now for the wealth pillar. You can choose habits like daily deep work blocks, revenue-generating actions, outreach numbers, and performance tracking. Anything that relates to your wealth goals. So give yourself no choice but to produce. And when you see your numbers improve, your identity will begin shifting automatically. For the love and relationships pillar, you can select habits that reinforce presence, communication, and emotional grounding. So these behaviors will regulate your nervous system and stabilize your mood. And better emotional discipline here basically translates into better decisions everywhere else. Now for the self aspect, you can build habits like journaling, prayer, reading, learning, reflection, recovery, etc. These keep you internally anchored no matter how demanding the next 30 days will become, and you will regain authority over your internal world, instead of letting impulses run the show and being reactive to everything that happens. Finally, put these habits somewhere visible so that you cannot escape them. Use a whiteboard, a Notes app, a Notion dashboard, or a Google Sheet to track them daily and check them off every single day. Now, with these habits locked into place, your behavior will begin shifting automatically, and that shift will carry straight into the next layer of this process, where your body becomes the fastest lever for becoming unrecognizable in the next 30 days. So let's talk about the 30-day overhaul. So you need to treat your physical transformation as the primary driver of this entire 30-day overhaul. Once your body starts changing, your brain will follow, and your emotions will stabilize, and your discipline will rise naturally without you even forcing it. So you should commit to a fully structured, non-negotiable physical protocol that removes any randomness, removes negotiation, and removes every excuse you used to rely on. When your body begins operating at a higher standard, every part of your life will shift upwards. A regulated body always supports a regulated mind, so physical cues shape your identity faster than thoughts do. Because physiological changes create internal evidence that you're becoming someone different. Every rep, every step, every clean meal, every morning will send a message to your brain that you're operating at a different level. Now, the brain updates its beliefs based on what it repeatedly sees you do, which makes visible physical improvement a powerful identity anchor. Once your body starts improving, you're going to feel a noticeable shift in energy, clarity, and emotional stability. And you should use your physical routine as leverage. When your body feels strong and stable, your discipline becomes easier to maintain. So a strong body pushes you towards better decisions, and willpower increases when your physiology is optimized. So your entire life will just elevate when your physical health becomes organized, intentional, and structured. Now you must build your physical transformation around 4 pillars. These pillars will determine whether your body can sustain peak performance or not. The pillars are movement, nutrition, hydration, and sleep or recovery. And you need all 4 working together because each one supports the others. When one collapses, the others start failing as well. So the first part here is movement. You should move every day. Your body adapts through repetition, not occasional bursts of intensity. So try to aim for 8,000 to 12,000 steps each day. Just walking and having that steady movement will improve your mood, reduce your cravings, and stabilize your nervous system in general. And break the steps down into small chunks so it feels easy to hit your daily target. And you can pair walking with activities like sales calls or podcasts or reflection to reinforce the habit. Now you need 2 to 5 strength training sessions weekly, so follow simple routines like push-pull legs or a full body routine so you can always know what to do, and you don't have to really think about it. Once you get into the gym and increase weights gradually over time. Also, try to insert small physical resets throughout the day to basically stay loose, energized, and sharp. You can use 1-minute posture checks or shoulder rolls during long periods of sitting there. Just anything to keep you moving throughout the day. Use a few deep breaths every hour as well to just re-energize your brain. Now, when it comes to nutrition, you need clean, structured meals. Your food choices directly influenced your energy, mood, focus, and consistency. So always opt for a nutrient-dense, single-ingredient whole foods if possible, and completely eliminate anything that's heavily processed and repeat the same meals often so that your energy stays stable and your decision fatigue disappears. To do that, you can use meal templates so that your mind stays clear. You can easily create basically a 1-week meal plan with your favorite meals and just keep repeating it every single week. And believe me, you won't get tired of it because 7 meals over 7 days. You're basically cycling through them every week. I don't think you would necessarily get bored, and if you do, then create a 2-week meal plan and cycle that. And make sure you eat enough protein, because protein stabilizes blood sugar, which keeps your meals sharp and steady. So make sure to increase your protein intake to support muscle recovery and reduce cravings as well. And again, try to eat clean foods. Processed garbage food only slows you down. It lowers your mood and keeps you trapped in addictive eating cycles. And there's a lot more to this, but we're not going to go too deep into it today. But try to go for nutrient-dense, clean, whole foods and prioritize whole foods that keep you energized. Remove any foods that pull you into cycles of fatigue, impulsivity, and just addiction. In short, so the next step is hydration here. So hydration controls your energy levels. It controls your appetite, and it can control cognitive performance and discipline. So try to drink 2 to 3 L of water daily so your body can function at its peak. And also is better to sip throughout the day instead of drinking a lot and random bursts. So another tip here is to add electrolytes during training or long demanding days, or just in general. Now, when it comes to sleep, you need obviously consistent sleep recovery is the key to sustaining high performance. So try to keep a stable sleep schedule, wake up and go to bed at the same time every day, if possible, or at least as close as possible to the same time every day. And sleep in a cold, dark room with weighted blankets if you can. And before going to bed, use a simple wind-down routine to help your body transition into rest. Dim your lights, or at the very least, turn off any overhead lighting and any screens, at least like an hour before bed, and use stretching, deep breathing, or some kind of meditation before bed to release any tension from the day. Journaling here will also help you to remove any of those ruminating thoughts that you might have as you are going to bed. Now, once these pillars are set, you need daily rituals that keep your body locked into a high-performance rhythm. So the best way to do this is to install morning, midday, and evening protocols for yourself. Now what they do is they basically turn your physical habits into automatic patterns that don't rely on motivation. And you can write them down somewhere and just basically follow them every single day. So in the morning, I would recommend to start with some kind of physical activation ritual. Your mornings will determine how the rest of your day unfolds. So drink water immediately to wake your system up, and then use a 5-minute movement sequence to fully wake your body up. This could be, stretching. It could be a bunch of push-ups. It could be just a quick run. It could be walking outside. Movement increases blood flow and pushes you out of grogginess. So even just a quick stretch or a walk can improve your day dramatically. In the morning, you can also review your targets so that your day begins with direction, and this will keep your priorities top of mind. It will also allow you to start the day with agency instead of reactivity. Now in the afternoons, that's where most people lose discipline. So it's the perfect moment to reset and just maintain your momentum. So take a short walk to refresh your brain and energy. Walking clears any mental fog you might have. It increases blood flow and it helps you regain focus. It also allows you to obviously hit those daily step targets. So even just 5 to 10 minutes of intentional movement will lift your mood, reset your nervous system, and give you the clarity you need to maintain momentum through the second half of your day. Make sure you eat a clean, protein-heavy meal. If you eat lunch, keep your meals predictable and structured like we talked about, so that you can avoid decision fatigue and prioritize whole, single-ingredient foods that sustain your focus and stabilize your blood sugar throughout the rest of your day. Finally, use a 1-minute breathing break to basically regulate your nervous system and bring yourself back to center. Deep breathing resets stress by activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which calms your body and mind. Now, in the evening, when evening comes around, this is your chance to really prioritize recovery and make sure your body gets what it needs to perform again tomorrow by using evening rituals intentionally. So how well you rest will directly determine how strong, how focused, and how disciplined you feel when you wake up the next morning. So try to create space for your body to basically slow down by reducing any lights and noise so that your mind can start letting go. And then you can use some stretching, a warm shower, or gentle breathwork to basically release any physical tension and signal to your nervous system that the day is complete, that you're safe, and you can relax. Then look at your physical targets for the day and check off what you completed. You can also do this first, and then you could create that space that we talked about. This simple act of reviewing and marking tasks as done will build self-trust by proving to yourself that you actually follow through on your commitments, and it reinforces your identity through action completion, which is obviously very important for the next 30 days. And it also reminds your brain that you're becoming the disciplined person you're aiming to be. Then set up your physical environment so that tomorrow can start smoothly by laying out your gym clothes where you'll see them first thing in the morning, for example, or prepping your meals, or at least organizing your ingredients. So eating clean requires zero thought and effort. And you can actually reduce the friction as much as possible and set up your hydration station with a filled water bottle ready to go, so you can actually hit the ground running in the morning without any friction or decision fatigue, so that you don't reach for the white monster in the fridge before you reach for water. Basically, once your daily rituals are defined, you need measurable targets that show progress quickly. So these targets will give you proof that the physical transformation is actually happening. So make sure to hit your minimum daily step. Goal is the easiest way to burn calories and keep your mood steady. Just check your phone or your watch throughout the day to see where you're at, and you can sneak in extra steps whenever you feel like during calls or at lunch, or when you need a quick break. That way, you hit your number without even feeling it, and without even feeling like you're adding another workout to your day, when in reality you actually are. And stick to a consistent strength training schedule. Muscle growth changes how you look and also how you see yourself. So use the same workout split each week so that you're not wasting energy figuring out what to do every time and try to lift a little heavier or do a couple more repetitions than last time. That's just that simple. That steady progress will give you real proof that your body is actually changing under the surface, even if it doesn't look like it in the mirror yet. Now, when it comes to your diet, keep it simple and focused, and just make sure you're hitting your daily protein target, because that's what keeps hunger under control. It's also preventing you from reaching for garbage food when you get any cravings. So use meal templates as we discussed to stay consistent. Basically eating the same solid meals on repeat so that you're not wasting any mental energy trying to decide what to eat every single day. And make sure you actually track your recovery so that you don't burn out halfway through. So protect your sleep window every single night, and you can only do that if you actually track. That's when your body actually rebuilds. It's during sleep, so try to sprinkle in some quick rest moments throughout the day as well. Even just a minute or two of just deep breathing or stretching will actually activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and it will keep your nervous system from staying locked in overdrive. Now finally, your environment needs to work for you, not against you. So the space around you shapes your choices way more than you actually think. And when your surroundings support what you're trying to do, everything gets easier. There's less friction, fewer temptations, and constant reminders of basically who you're becoming. So set things up so that the healthy choice is always the easiest choice to do. For example, you can put your workout clothes or water bottle and supplements somewhere where you can easily see them in the morning, and make the good stuff basically easier to grab than the junk, and make sure you use little reminders around your space to basically keep you on track. This can be sticking notes or cues in places you pass by a lot, or scattering small visual hints around your home to basically help your habits stick. So for example, another example here is if you're trying to read more books than scattered books around the house. Now, once your physical routine is solid, it's time to basically lock down your environment in what you're letting in. Because if you don't, you'll keep pulling back into your old habits. So let's talk about environmental lockdown and input starvation. So you need to take full control of your environment. Your surroundings shape your behavior far more than your intentions do. And the places you spend time and the people you interact with, the content you consume, and the stimuli in general that you allow into your system all decide how disciplined you actually become. So you should treat your environment as a force multiplier rather than a background detail. If your environment supports your goals, you won't move faster and with far less resistance. When your environment is messy, distracting, noisy, or cluttered, your mind drifts back into the patterns that you're trying to actually escape. So you must engineer your space with the same seriousness you apply to your habits, because the right environment will make discipline feel natural. Now, the goal here is to basically make it so that the right choices are just easier to make than the wrong ones. You're basically designing your life so that the path of least resistance leads you towards your goals, not away from them. And your brain will always take the path of least resistance. So when you set things up this way, discipline doesn't have to be a constant battle. It actually just becomes the path of least resistance. You're just following the easiest route, and that route happens to be the one that's good for you. So make it as frictionless as possible to do the things that actually move you forward. For example, if you want to work out in the morning, then lay your gym clothes out the night before. If you want to eat clean, then prep your meals ahead of time. Just remove any barriers between you and the habits you're trying to build so that they feel natural instead of difficult. At the same time, you want to add more friction to the things that actually pull you off track. So if junk food is the problem, for example, don't keep it in the house. If scrolling social media kills your productivity, and then either delete the apps, log out of them, or put them in a folder that you have to click and click on 3 times to basically get to make the bad habits annoying, and that you don't reach for them automatically is what I'm trying to say. So your environment should constantly remind you of who you're trying to become. Every time you walk into a room, open your phone, or sit down at your desk, you should basically seek that point you towards the person you're building. It's about creating a physical space that basically makes the new version of you feel inevitable. Now, after that, you really need to take a close look at the places where you're spending most of your time. The physical space around you has a huge impact on your mental state, as we've discussed in other videos on this channel and on your behavior. So think about it. When you walk into a cluttered mess, your room, your thoughts tend to scatter and you can't really focus. When you're in a clean, organized space, your mind feels clearer and more focused by default. You don't even have to work to get focused. Basically, your home, your workspace, and even your digital screens should all reflect the discipline you're trying to build. They're actively shaping how you think and how you act every single day. So start by setting up your home in a way that makes discipline feel easier and more natural. Go through your rooms and basically remove any clutter that's been piling up and simplify your spaces. And create some open breathing room that lowers the mental noise you experience every time you walk through the door. And when there's less stuff competing for your attention, you basically notice that your mind feels calmer almost immediately without you even having to do anything. You're literally removing stuff. So even something as simple as clearing off a countertop or a table can make a real difference. Every time you basically see a clean surface, it actually sends a little signal to your brain that things are under control, and that subtle feeling of order helps keep you centered. It also sends a little dopamine head to your brain as well whenever you see a clean surface. So the beauty of keeping things simple is that a minimalist environment is actually way easier to maintain. If you think about it, when you don't have a bunch of random stuff everywhere, staying clean doesn't feel like a big chore. It just becomes a natural part of your routine. And another important thing here is to pay attention to the atmosphere in your home, to things like lighting, like scents, and even sound levels of TV or radios, etc., and/or of the outside world can actually have a surprisingly strong influence on how you feel throughout the day. Now, during the daytime, try to keep your space bright and, if possible, keep it as quiet as you can. Natural or bright artificial light can actually energize you, sharpen your focus, and help you feel more alert and basically ready to tackle whatever's in front of you. Then in the evening, try to switch to warmer, softer lighting. This will help signal to your body that it's time to start winding down, and it makes it easier for your nervous system to relax and basically prepare for quality sleep. The next step here is your workspace. Your workspace deserves the same level of attention because this is where deep focus either happens or basically doesn't. So you want to structure it in a way that makes concentration feel like a natural default, not something that you have to fight for every time. So keep your desk as clean and as minimal as possible so that your attention naturally stays on the work right in front of you, instead of wandering through random objects that are scattered around your space or room. And arrange your essentials in a logical way that makes sense for your workflow. When everything has its place and you can find what you need without really thinking about it, you'll stop wasting precious mental energy trying to search for stuff. You'll be able to just find it. It will also not be in the back of your mind, and try to cut down on any visual clutter as much as you can. The fewer things there are that are basically competing for your eye's attention, the less your mind will drift away from what you're actually trying to accomplish. And beyond just keeping things minimal, make sure your workspace is physically comfortable so that you can actually sustain focus for long periods of time, without your body starting to basically ache or feel fatigued. So try to dial in your posture. Set up your chair height, your monitor position, your desk arrangement. Everything can be optimized so that you can work for extended stretches without your back, neck, or shoulders hurting, which obviously will impede your focus and create a space that you can genuinely feel good about entering every single day. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be spending 8, 10, 12 hours in this space working, so you might as well make it pretty nice. When your workspace feels inviting and supportive, you'll naturally want to show up and do the work because it's just nice to be there. So the next step here is your digital environment. Your devices like your phone, your computer, your TV, your tablet. They're often the biggest gateways to distractions in your entire life. So go through and remove the icons, the apps, the notifications that constantly hijack your attention and pull you away from what matters. Be ruthless about this. At the end of the day, you don't want to spend your life basically checking your phone every time there's a notification or every time a new reel pops up. So turn off or silence all the non-essential notifications so that your brain can stop getting hit with constant dopamine triggers every few minutes. And if there are apps that, trigger impulsive, time-wasting habits, just delete them entire day. During these 30 days, you can always basically reinstall them later on if you want. But for now, just remove the temptation completely. And then restructure your phone and your computer's home screen to actively support your goals instead of undermine them. Put all of your productive tools, like the apps that you're and the programs that actually help you work, learn, and grow, right in front of you, where they're easy to access and use. Then take all the distracting stuff and basically bury it deep inside folders that are several clicks away, and just make it annoying enough to access so that you won't reach for it automatically, just out of habit anytime you feel bored. Now, once your physical and digital spaces are locked down, the next layer is really controlling what enters your mind. Let's talk about your inputs. So this is where you really need to starve out all that mental noise that's basically been keeping you overstimulated, scattered, and unable to focus on what actually matters. So the truth is, what you feed your mind over these 30 days is going to have a massive impact on how you think, how you feel, and how you act. So you've got to be ruthless about cutting out the low-quality stimulation that's been clouding your judgment and stealing your clarity and focus so far. Now, when you clean up what's going into your brain, everything else starts to fall into place. So first, start by cutting your content consumption down to only what's truly essential. Most of what we consume every day is just noise that doesn't really move us forward at all. So set some real firm boundaries around those short-form platforms that constantly fragment your attention and keep you jumping from one thing to the next without ever going deep on anything meaningful. And seriously consider removing the apps completely, or at least logging out for the full 30 days so that you're not really tempted to mindlessly scroll whenever you have a spare moment. And instead of filling your time with those quick dopamine hits, try to replace them with long-form content that actually teaches you something valuable, like, for example, this channel. Or even better, just embrace some silence and let your mind breathe. And try to curate the content you consume. Pick just one high-quality content source that's directly aligned with where you're trying to go and stick with it exclusively during this period. Just try to master everything that person is saying. This could be one mentor you really respect, one podcast that can consistently delivers value, or one book series, or just one book in general that's a bit bigger, that's teaching you the skills and the mindsets you need right now. You commit to following just one voice, instead of bouncing around between dozens of different opinions. You drastically reduce the mental noise and the confusion you have, and you start to build real clarity and focus around that subject. So, next is noise. You absolutely need to build in some real moments of silence throughout your day, so that your nervous system can actually have a chance to calm down and regulate itself properly. So start by lowering or eliminating all that idle background noise that's constantly agitating your brain without you even realizing it. And what that means is turn off that random TV that's always on in the background or that radio, and skip the chaotic playlist and just let yourself exist in a quieter environment. For once, give your mind permission to just be. You also don't necessarily need music to focus or to work. Just be in silence. Give your mind permission to just be, to just be there without needing constant stimulation to fill every second of silence, and make it a point to intentionally build in some silent moments during your walks, while you're eating your meals, or during your breaks between tasks. I see a lot of people only taking walks while listening to a podcast, or only eating while watching YouTube or TV. Give your brain a moment to just enjoy what it's doing at the moment. You don't have to be distracting it all the time. Silence isn't empty or boring. It actually gives your brain the space it needs to process everything that's been happening, to integrate what you've learned, to reset itself. Once you start incorporating more silence into your day, you'll notice pretty quickly that you feel mentally lighter. You're more grounded, and you're way more centered than you felt in a long time. Now, when it comes to people, you really need to be intentional and selective about who gets access to your time, energy, and emotional bandwidth during this transformational period. So pay close attention to how different people in your life actually impact your mood, your energy levels, and the choices you make day to day. So if someone consistently brings tension, drama, confusion, or negativity into your life, it's okay to create some space and distance from them. For now, keep your circle intentionally tight during this 30-day period while you're building the new version of yourself. Because you can't afford to have people pulling you back into your old patterns during those 30 days. If you're planning on making a strong entry into 2026 instead, try to spend your time with the people who genuinely reinforce discipline and support the changes you're actually making. Actively seek out relationships with people who challenge you and raise your standards, who hold you accountable, and who inspire you to keep pushing forward. Choose to surround yourself with people who celebrate your growth, who encourage your evolution, who genuinely want to see you become the best version of yourself. Next, make sure to set up some solid boundaries that actually protect your attention. Without them, you're just basically going to keep releasing discipline through all of that constant stimulation that's coming at you from every direction. So when you put these boundaries in place properly, your days will naturally start to feel so much cleaner, calmer, and way easier to control without having to fight yourself constantly. So the first thing you need to do is silence absolutely everything that has the potential to disrupt your focus and pull you out of whatever you're doing. So make a commitment to keep your phone completely quiet during all your working hours, so you're not constantly being interrupted by every little notification that comes through. And set things up so that only your truly essential contacts have the ability to actually reach you during your focused time, and let everything else wait until you're ready to deal with it. Now you also need to actively reduce all that information overload that's been bombarding you nonstop. So put some real restrictions on how often you allow yourself to check the news, scroll through feeds, or respond to messages throughout the day so that you're not constantly feeding your brain more stuff to process. And whenever you catch yourself about to consume more content, make a conscious choice to take action instead. At the end of the day, that's what will actually move you forward during these 30 days, rather than just filling your head with more information. And during the specific hours when you know you're most vulnerable to getting distracted and falling into old patterns, you should actively block access to those platforms that basically tends to pull you in. So don't just rely on willpower alone here. Actually use app blockers, focus modes, or whatever tools you need to basically create some friction between you and those apps, and then to support your discipline when it's hardest to maintain. So make it a habit to physically keep your phone completely out of reach when you're working on something important or when you're training so that you're not even tempted to grab it reflexively. So once you've got these restrictions locked in and working for you, the last critical layer you need to tighten up is really your social environment. Because the reality is that the people around you are quietly but powerfully reinforcing who you're becoming every single day.
Whether you realize it or not. And if you want to learn more about this, then again, check my previous video on the subject. But your social life is an ecosystem that's actively influencing your identity and shaping your behavior patterns every single day. So during these 30 days especially, you absolutely must protect your energy fiercely and deliberately, and avoid putting yourself in environments or situations that encourage your old habits and pull you backwards. So the first step here is to be willing to take some real space from the people who consistently drain your discipline and make it harder for you to stick to your standards. Start paying attention to which specific people in your life tend to trigger those old patterns and behaviors that you're actively trying to leave behind, and make the tough but necessary decision to reduce your contact with those people until your new identity has had enough time to stabilize and basically become your default way of being. So instead of spreading yourself thin, intentionally surround yourself with the people who genuinely align with your standards and who naturally reinforce the person you're trying to become. And actively lean into the conversations and the relationships that consistently lift your mindset and challenge you to think bigger and act better. and focus your energy on building and deepening connections with people who actively support your discipline and who celebrate your growth, rather than questioning it or trying to pull you back down like a crab. So now that you've got your physical environment dialed in and your inputs carefully controlled and your social circle fully aligned with the person you're actively becoming, you're finally ready to basically close the loop to this entire transformation and bring all of these different pieces together for the next 30 days by basically taking action. With that being said, let's go over the review and your action items for the day or the next few days. So we talked about the behavioral reset, we talked about goals, we talked about the 30-day overhaul, environmental lockdown and input starvation. We're at the review right now, and finally, your action items for the day or the next few days. First, write out your full map for all 4 pillars and keep it somewhere you'll see constantly so you begin the next 30 days with direction. Clean your environment, purge your inputs, and set up your physical protocols or your behaviors become easier to follow. And finally, follow your habits for the next 24 hours without any negotiations so you can actually build immediate evidence that you're already beginning the transformation. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more, comment below what you'd like to see next, and if you want to work with me personally, then make sure you book a call from the second link in the description. If you want this document along with this training, then make sure to join the free community from the first link in the description. Once again, thank you for being here, and I'm going to see you in the next one.